Welcome to this week's Two Men in the Middle. This is where two men in the middle of the country get together and talk about politics, current events, and other fun stuff. I'm Craig Huey.
I'm Brandon Kinnig.
Brandon, we were warming up and decided we had to cut to the mic because we started to get into a very heated conversation about Barbie. And being the cinephile between us, you actually pulled off the Barbenheimer. Is that how you say that?
That's how you say that. Yeah.
This weekend. So we'll get to Oppenheimer. I'm assuming Oppenheimer is a more serious film, and there's a more traditional conversation about the movie.
Yeah, amazing movie. Yeah.
Barbie seems to have taken on kind of an absolute life of its own. So
it is.
Without any more to do, Brandon, you've seen the movie. Tell us about just what did you think of this film?
So, first of all, it's everything you said, right? It's campy, it's satirical, it's PG-13, it's not really meant for young kids, it's really teenagers and adults because young kids are not going to get the jokes and the innuendo, which is going to go right over their heads. So, it is meant to be sarcastic, satirical, what's the word I'm looking for? Defacing,
over the top,
but also self-defacing. Like it pokes fun at Barbie itself, even though it is a Barbie movie, and so it's very self-mocking and and irreverential. So it's all of that wrapped up in it. Like I thought it was a funny movie, and what's interesting to me is you were commenting on all these like men that are saying it's an anti-men feminist screed, like. So there's definitely a feminist take there because they take the notion of Barbie and what it represents, and they talk about like lack of equality in the modern world. But at the same time, like they're not beating you over the head with it. There's enough like just randomness within the plot to where it's not every second. And the interesting thing is like the message at the end, without getting too much into the weeds, is that everybody should have like goals and their own identity, and so it's like Barbie should have her own dreams, goals. Ken should have his own dream. And again, we're talking about dolls, right? That are like talking at live.
That's what we can't lose sight of.
We can't lose sight of that.
About dolls,
but it is
we are substituting dolls for the complexity of modern human gender roles.
But it is very meta, right? Because these toys live in this make believe world, and then they find out there's things like death and cellulite and aging. And so,
apparently the gynecologist.
And so, yeah, it's not so much like, and there is this like fight between the Barbies and the and trying to get one over the men. But at the end, like they all kind of like there's this truce, and it's like we need to just be individuals. You do what you want to do, I do what I want to do, and let's each like achieve our goals. And that's what this should be about. Like there shouldn't be, this. Dependency on each other and this constant tension and friction. Like, why can't we get to a point where, and there is a monologue that I forget her last name, the actress.
America Fiera. What's her name?
Delivers, where she does, that's the one moment that people have dialed into that's like super feminist, where she I think talks for like 5 minutes where she gives a speech about how like women are never good enough. Like if they are too persistent, they're seen as too pushy, but yet if they're not pushy enough, they're too mild-mannered and people walk all over them. They're seen as competitors by other women, but then they're seen as bitchy by men. That I think was interesting, and that's the one people dialed into as being over feminist. But at the same time, it really just kind of speaks to like the double standards, right? Where, women try to strike this balance, and, especially I think if it's really geared towards like professional life, like the workplace, and how like no matter what they do, it's always wrong, right? They can't like strike a perfect chord because other women are going to be jealous or other men are going to see them as a threat.
Even for women, that striking a perfect chord is something you should be interested in.
Right.
I mean, that's one of the huge differences in men and women. Men generally just don't care that much,
and they just
about
do
the
what
wide of field is what women care about.
And that's the thing too. And if women showcase that same tendency, they're looked at differently than men are, right?
Absolutely.
They're like, why, And so it was really a commentary too on that. And so that was in the movie. Again, it's not the only theme and not the only overarching theme. The movie was very meta. It gets into the idea of expectations for girls. There's a lot of just criticism of like the way Barbie came about itself. And I think that's why a lot of people went to go see it, because it poked fun at itself too. Like
Sure.
all these things were happening simultaneously. There was the feminism critique. There was the critique of like the consumer culture and toys being marketed to kids. Like it had all of these different critiques wrapped into one, but it also made it a little bit at times confusing to follow, because it was just all of this. But again, it's meant to be lighthearted. I think that's why people went to see it, because it was different. It was not just a kids movie. Like most people who went to see it knew that this was going to be very sarcastic and satirical, which is what it was.
How else would you do a Barbie film?
Yeah.
Because in some ways it's mocking or making fun of the things that Barbie introduced into the culture. Barbie was introduced, in the mid-50s-ish?
Yeah.
And it really was
55.
a way to get young girls and women involved in consumerism. It was a way to sell them products. That I saw a few clips where the first seed is the little girls circa the Stanley Kubrick 2001 film, where they're smashing their
baby
their
dolls,
traditional babies. And a lot of people have looked at that and said, right off the bat, we're talking about breaking up traditional motherhood. This isn't about taking care of children anymore. Suddenly now we've moved on to something that's all about consumerism.
See, I didn't even think about that seeing the movie. That's such a stretch, but I did think about it. I'm like, wow, that's really saying something.
Brandon,
though,
you're not old and bitter enough yet.
I guess
not.
not.
You'll get there.
Because
but
that
just not
moment, I'm
yet.
like, okay, this makes sense then, because up until this point, like the only dolls little girls had were baby dolls. They had nothing that were a doll that represented them or was aspirational, right? Like, this is who I can grow into, or this is what I can become as an adult. And so Barbie was the first doll that gave them something that was aspirational, or something what they would look like or could be,
wow, something really to aspire to.
Well, I know.
Here's the physical form of a woman that is absolutely
unrealistic.
Yeah,
which again,
I am anti-Barbie, just completely across the.
Well,
the
and they
spectrum.
poke fun at that part too. But I'm just saying, like the whole thing about smashing the babies and that destruction of the nuclear family. I mean, come on, they're showing the progression of what girls had to play with before versus later. And granted, it's been an evolution, right? And so now, like, there's all kinds of toys that are geared towards girls. But at that time, there wasn't much, right? It's not like there was just this overwhelming, catering and marketing to girls as kids. And so that was the difference, I think.
And Brandon, we've talked about, I consume a shit ton of right-wing media. I mean, Ben Shapiro, Charlie Kirk, Jason Whitlock, Jack Posobiec. Yeah. If you name it, that's where I hang out most of the time if I want to listen to news or podcast or kind of news entertainment podcast. The right's always been more interesting and left, going back to Rush Limbaugh. They've always just done media just in a more entertaining way.
Well, and they've always owned particular media spaces like radio and
from
others,
the AM days, there's just more of a tradition, and they have more of a kind of an established methodology, I think, of delivering content. One of the things that genre really has focused in on right now is the difference in between men and women's traditional roles in the family and just roles in society in general. And every time something like this comes out, they look at it as evidence that Hollywood is in cahoots with the media and the culture to never send a single message to a young woman or a girl that being a mother is an acceptable role to have in society. And that if you are a mother, there are times that you don't have to be anything more than that. Now, I'm not taking this side, but I'm going to argue kind of the counter side a little bit here is, would it kill us to ever produce a film or a movie or a TV show that celebrates or shows a traditional role of motherhood in a light that's positive? Do you think that's a fair criticism at this movie?
I mean, but we have other movies that have done that. And so, one of the central components of this movie was a mother and a daughter, right? That had a very tortured relationship, severed relationship because the daughter's a teenager. So one of the themes of the movie is mother and daughter bonding and becoming closer towards the end after being, somewhat just distant. And so, so the idea that somehow like motherhood is just like completely erased or not even present in the movie isn't completely accurate either. Now, granted, this mother had a job. She wasn't only a mother. But, there was that storyline that was, intertwined in the film. So, I don't think that's necessarily a valid criticism, because if you're going to pick apart one movie for that, let alone one movie that's about a toy and try to project that it needs to be this and this and it should have this, like, this was a fictional film. This was not based on reality whatsoever. It's not based on...
We're talking about dolls still.
Right. It's not meant to be motivational. It's really not to be anything but just like lighthearted escapism, which is what it was.
The other theme that they hit on a lot is, and you tell me if this theme exists in Barbie, is that no woman needs a man in her life. You don't need to be married. You don't need to be in a relationship with a man. There are things that we bring to the table, but in reality, it's totally fine and totally acceptable if you want to go through your entire life without having any significant relationships with men. And that's another theme that brings out through Barbie. Like I said, everybody needs to go their separate ways. Nothing in Hollywood is pushing people back together anymore into marriage or parenthood. Is that a legitimate criticism you think of this movie?
Well, I mean, somewhat, yes. I mean, of this movie in particular, that is a theme. Obviously, Barbie and Ken not being decoupled, that does happen, and they kind of go their separate ways and go on their own, like, introspective, journeys, like, trying to find themselves. So, yeah, that does happen at the end. It's done from a very friendly basis. It's not out of tension or very antagonistic, but that is a message of the film saying, hey, like, you can be and do whatever you want to independently, like, you don't need to depend on anybody else. So that is one of the core messages.
And I think the thing that I found on the right, I expected those two type of things. Those are traditional. They have religious undertones.
Yeah.
I've heard those before. There is a lot of just straight up misogyny and hate for women on the right, especially if you get to the outer bands of the right, and then you get to the older dudes. You get to Bill O'Reilly, some folks like that. They talk about things like women's right to vote. There's this whole manosphere people, the Andrew Tates and all of that, who talk about biblical religious roles for women. So I think that's what's kind of in the soup and in the ether right now on the right, and that's where some of this stuff comes out of.
So, and I wonder, like, so there's always been that undercurrent, right? But I feel like it was either suppressed or it just wasn't as loud before. And as part of this, like, a reaction, obviously a reaction to the culture, right? And the culture rapidly changing even more so than where it was, that there's just this upswelling of criticism and just, I mean, from many different circles and voices, because it seems to be louder and just more direct than it has ever been before.
It seems to be sharper. It seems to be more focused on that kind of, like,
I think that's probably the way to frame it.
Of kind of what is a man and what is a woman. This is the famous Matt Walsh thing.
And I think part of that coming out of, like, the
issue.
trans issue. Yeah, is really kind of sharpen that into focus.
So we take a movie where all of the women in it are plastic and are these unrealistic, the toys an unrealistic representation of women, and somehow we forge that into some feminist plotline is something I've heard people have a little bit of a problem with. And I think you said before, there's a lot of things in this movie that just don't make sense. If you're going to look at it for things you would judge a traditional movie on, it's definitely got some holes in it as a movie.
Yeah, right. And again, I think part of it is people trying to project onto it something that it isn't either. It's not trying to be some type of epic or some type of moralistic film. It's attempting to be the opposite of it. I mean, I even saw criticisms about how, even in the beginning when Barbie and Ken are together, they're not sleeping in the same bed. Well, they're also toys that don't have genitalia, so
they're not really a couple, are they?
I mean, right? I mean,
they were platonic friends. They were a couple,
right? I mean, there was always that innuendo that they may have been a couple, but it's not like they were ever engaged in scenes from, again, a marketing perspective by Mattel
Barbie
that they
and
were
Ken
kissing.
Ever have a kid? Was there ever
No.
a carriage or a baby for them?
No.
I can't remember.
There was a pregnant Barbie doll that came out.
That's right. And they yanked it pretty quick.
Right. That was the other, again, because I don't know Barbie well, but the other funny thing about this movie is all of the controversial releases and toys that were discontinued are featured prominently in the film as kind of tongue-in-cheek. So pregnant Barbie, there's also a dog, there's the Ken's friend Alan, who was only briefly on the... Yeah. So just the
My
weird
Barbie
things
history
that
like
last.
yours, it's not
I don't
the
know,
best.
but it was funny that they put all this out there and they just kind of lay it all out there, front and center. But again, I guess I was surprised by the just overarching reaction. I mean, it cleaned up at the box office. It actually was the largest opening weekend box office of the year, fourth largest in history.
I saw it today. It's sneaking up on $500 million already.
Yeah,
so
which is
it's
insane.
going to do a monster business, which I also think think totally sucks, because here comes Barbie 2, here comes Barbie 3.
Oh,
all
have
that
you seen?
means
There's
is
actually a
another,
timeline of all of the Mattel
God.
toys that are going to be made into
Is
movies.
it
Like
Hot Wheels is going to be?
Hot Wheels
this
is-
is
yeah.
ridiculous. Another toy company is now in the movie business because of Barbie.
Right.
In some ways, I wish this movie would have went down in flames just to prevent the franchise. But there's
get
just
ready.
no way.
It's only started.
So, Brandon, why is men, let's pick on men exclusively here in this, why is it that some men get so fired up over any presentation of non-traditional gender roles? And by men, I mean conservative men, men on the right. Usually this is men of a certain age. This is religious men. What is left in the culture on the right that still kind of promotes that type of feeling and pullback and reaction when you see a feminist-themed movie?
I don't know. And I struggled with this for a long time. I think on an individual level, I often wonder if there's something psychological, that there's a feeling of inadequacy.
I don't know, jealousy.
Right, because you do wonder why it is so, because with some of these films and some of the things that come out of our culture, the pushback from some of these men is just much stronger and much more vociferous than it is for like anything else. And you're like, really, this is
It's
the one
personal.
issue that
you don't
it's from
light a
personal
car on
standpoint.
fire a la Ben Shapiro,
Right.
when he burned the Barbie and kid car, if you don't feel something deep inside about this.
Yeah, and that's what I don't understand, because it's almost like, how is this personally impacting you? Is this going to change your personal life? And so I don't understand what the implication is there.
And politically, if we look at down to the GOP versus the Democrats, what is the GOP? What is their policy suggestions around women's roles and gender roles? Where, other than a big giant fight about the trans issue, which is not really centered up for what this is.
Yeah,
how is the GOP moving forward in any way on it?
They have no policy prescriptions, and they've actually backtracked on things like the Violence Against Women's Act, which they supported in prior years, and
what
then
culture
opposed.
war is that fighting? What constituency is that for?
I don't know. Yeah,
I don't understand the GOP freak out on the conservative side about Barbie. I get it by saying, hey, this is a movie that should have been targeted for little girls, and like you said, this was something targeted for a mom and her 8 to 12-year-old daughter.
Yeah.
I think, to go see. And I can understand people getting upset that, hey, where are the movies like this just for kids anymore? But this
was not meant to be a kids' movie, and I would say when I was in the auditorium,
but they didn't tell anybody that either. The marketing on this has been really good.
Yeah,
and I don't think anybody knew really the plot points of this movie before they went into it.
I think the youngest person I saw, because when I went, I was surprised, which I first knew it was going to be a hit, because, and again, I have a AMC A-list pass, so I can see as many movies as I'd like to. So I'm not choosy about movies, because it's like I paid like $20 a month and see as many movies.
If you see a couple clunkers, it's not like, well, shit, I'm out $50.
Yeah, I don't have to
one
like
night
be
I'm
like,
out a
I
month.
can't believe I spent that much.
You don't have to get angry over it. Let's
when
say.
I went online, I started just looking at showings like on the open. I'm like, oh my gosh, like there's like all of these showings. There's like no open seats. I'm like, how can it be this full for Barbie every showing? But the youngest person in my auditorium was like 12 years old. A lot of people in their 30s, 40s, 50s, a lot of people that were just like came to laugh and just like wanted just like something funny and offbeat, which they got. So you're right. I think the marketing was very effective in terms of bringing people out, and they hit all the right notes because, again, they were also appealing not just to little girls, but also to people that may not necessarily like Barbie, but went for just the self-loathing aspect and the self-mocking aspects of the movie.
Wanting this to be something that mocked itself and something that could be made fun of.
Which it did. And that's what I don't understand the criticism of conservatives, too, because, like, I mean, if you're going to go after the feminist angle, I mean, this film like mocked everything. It did leave a stone unturned. It mocked itself. It mocked Mattel. I mean, the Mattel CEO was mocked. I mean, it was like the whole thing was self-mockery. So, again, I just don't understand why you would take it that seriously to begin with.
And there are also going to be certain parts of the political spectrum that are going to take anything like this as a chance just simply to protest and to yell and shout at the clouds and to make everybody and just remind everybody that they hate just about everything in the culture right now. Right. And I think on your right side, your Ben Shapiro's and Walsh's and people that really kind of went over the top on this, it's just part of building their brand to let you know that they think everything sucks these days.
Well, that's it. And I think that with our media landscape, I mean, it's this constant need to drive up your audience, drive up your likes, find a new topic, a new way to do that. I mean, it infiltrates our political conversation, and that's why we have all of these, issues that are made up, out of nothing in many cases, and then just the culture conversation as well, because they have to fill time and they have to make money off it. They try to monetize off of it, so that's what they do. And so burning a Barbie in a trash can,
sure,
you're going to be able to monetize that because it's dramatic. It's
absolutely
stands out.
It accomplished everything he wanted it to. And did we really think a nuanced conversation about gender roles was going to happen in a Barbie movie? I think a lot of this is people just looking for places to project, and this is just the easiest and safest place last week to project anger upon.
Well, and I think that's what's so frustrating with our country now, because it feels like every single thing becomes a lightning rod for that now, and it's nonstop. And I think Barbie is not going to be the last film or item to come out of our culture where that is seized upon. I mean, it's going to continue.
And men struggling with gender roles is something that's kind of a new phenomenon, and it is something that requires some conversation. We do have a problem with right now with men just disconnecting from the culture. I think we're seeing that in education. We're seeing it in work participation across the board.
I think really, I would key in on young men, right? I mean, so you have young men who are just kind of aimless now, like in their adult lives. College participation is falling among young men.
Men have just decided they don't need to go to school
and they're
anymore.
checking out. And then there's all the social isolation and alienation that's happening, and that's driving up suicide rates, but not only suicide rates but also anger, and that's manifesting itself in many different ways. So I think that there's a lot to be said for that, and to tackle that. I don't see how criticism of this accomplishes that. I mean, there's a lot more at stake with what's happening with young men in terms of, being marginalized and ignored. And that's a societal problem that we need to confront, but there's not one solution. And the Barbie movie, that has nothing to do with being able to.
I think you just said something important, that if you feel marginalized and ignored, then you look for everything makes you feel marginalized and ignored. And I think there's a lot of young men in the country right now that just don't know what the path forward is, and is looking for anybody. They're looking for anything or anyone to tell them this isn't your fault. This is something being done to you. Look at this silly movie about dolls.
Too at that point, because then you don't have to.
Even
do
movies
anything.
about dolls have these messages in that are keeping you kind of in this state.
Well, it plays into the victimhood mentality
100%.
now, right? Which is so pervasive. And I kind of laugh at this because how many years the right was critical about the left in terms of playing the victim and victimhood mentality on the left, and then the right now has fully embraced that to a degree in the Trump era we've never seen before, and it's constant. And and I think that's part of the problem, and it's unrelenting.
Yeah, and young men every day through the podcasts on the right that I listen to are getting told you are a victim.
Right.
Hey, if everybody's a victim, if the summer of BLM led to this much damage and caused this much stuff, and they were victimized by this, then you were victimized in the same way. And the Barbie movie just happened to come along at a point in time in the culture war where there's a whole section of men just looking for examples to show to mostly to younger men in order to grift, to, like you said, build clicks, money, following, brand. And it feels like everybody got something that they wanted out of the Barbie movie. Mattel gets billions of dollars of franchise and movies. Greta Gerwig, she gets to now go remake the Narnia franchise because this did so good, But what really did Barbie do? Is this really our best attempt at bringing some of these topics to light? Probably not.
No, it isn't.
That's way too much to heap on a movie about
and
dolls.
It's not meant to. And I think I was Greta Gerwig, actually, some of her published statements downplay that as well. Like, that was not her intent either with the movie. So again, this movie is not meant to change society, transform society. It's not meant to address societal issues in and of itself. Some of those are raised in the movie, but again, she was entrusted to make a movie based on this long-known brand and franchise.
What she was entrusted to do was make a movie that would bring in $1 billion.
Right, which looks
That's
like
really and it looks like she
was
accomplished
successful.
that.
Yeah,
and because she did that, now we're going to get 3 more of these pieces of crap. I've never seen this movie. I'm not going to see this movie.
Yeah.
This movie's not for me. I don't care. That's part of it too. Gentlemen, can't you have enough sense to say, listen, I'm a 50 or 60-year-old man. This isn't for me.
Right.
I don't know what it is. It's just a stupid little movie and just move on.
Whatever happened to just like, if there's something that isn't for you or that you don't like or is a target to you, ignore it and move on and, go to something that is appealing and targeted to you. But we're in a stage now where there's none of that. Like, it's not about just ignoring or live and let live. It's like, no, we're going to...
And you're right. If there's anything that can, kind of tweak my victimhood, I have to jump on it.
Yeah.
I can't just let anything pass. I have to point out everything. I'm assuming Oppenheimer was a much better movie than Barbie.
Yes. I mean, fantastic film. Oppenheimer
Let's save that one for next week, and we can get an actual decent review of that.
Okay, because there's a lot to say for that, and I think that film is going to be nominated for many Oscars. It was very well done.
I didn't realize the cast that thing had in it, so I started looking at some trailers and like, holy shit!
I will say, and it's not a criticism; it's just an observation. There is an incredible cast. There are so many characters in that film. It is difficult to keep track of some of the more minor characters because so many people come in and out of the film, but it is a masterful film. I mean, the plot is well done. The casting is phenomenal. It's orchestrated well. The juxtaposition of scenes and different points in time, that's well done. It's a film that makes you think. It's a film that educates. There's not enough good I can say about it, especially without giving away any spoilers. But it is a phenomenal film. It is one of those that will survive the test of time. And I can't say enough good.
Christopher Nolan movies just hit different. They look different. Yeah. The action's different. He's a guy who knows to put together an action movie over 3 hours and keep its pace. Look at the Batman
That was the thing.
stuff.
There's no slow moments in this movie. So you may think a 3-hour movie, like there's going to be points where, I get antsy. Like, no. Like, I mean, the pace continues and you are focused and glued into what is happening on screen for the entire film.
And that's my biggest complaint with movies. I can watch any turd piece of shit movie as long as it's moving quickly. Yeah. As soon as it bogs down, I'm done.
Right.
And it seems like every single movie I have seen in the last 5 years is 20 minutes too long.
Oh, yeah, I agree.
Every Marvel movie is 15 to 20 minutes too long. If you cut this and this, we'd be right where we need to be.
There's always those scenes that drag, and then you're like, oh, come on.
There's the worthless love scene in there.
Yeah.
So one quick question about Oppenheimer. Now we'll move on. One of the questions I've really seen about will they handle this in the movie, Oppenheimer tried to kill a professor when he was in college by poisoning him.
He did, yes.
Did they address that in this film? Okay.
That's very early in the film.
Okay.
So that is addressed. It comes up as a memory that plays out in real time when he is testifying regarding his security clearance after the war. So, they do not leave that stone unturned.
So they don't really... there's no hero arc, assuming, for Oppenheimer in this movie.
No, I mean, he is a conflicted character who has a lot of different layers to him, and that is put on full display. So he's not a hero. He's not an anti-hero. He is this character who is grappling with many different thoughts and emotions throughout his career, let alone during the development of the bomb itself. And that's what you really take away. Like, it isn't this black and white, good guy, bad guy. You see the conflict play out in him in real time, and all of that, his insecurities, his deficiencies, his quote unquote sins, all of that is laid out. Like, they don't conceal anything.
Gotcha.
So
we'll talk about. I said we'll talk about it next week. Then I asked you like 3 follow-up questions.
Right.
But I'm assuming this movie is going to win Best Picture, and this is going to be a movie that holds the test of time.
Oh yeah, it definitely should.
Going.
Best Actor as well. Best Supporting Actor, Robert Downey Jr. for playing the Strauss, who is the guy who's then nominated for, I believe it was War Secretary. So there are some just incredible acting roles in this too that, I mean, you get blown away by the performance. So there's a lot to say about it.
Turning to presidential politics, the big thing that I thought we'd be talking about by now, Trump's third indictment for January 6th, didn't come to pass.
Not yet. No.
I'm assuming, though, by end of the week, beginning of next week at the latest, that will be the story that dominates the presidential politics of 2024.
Right.
So, turning to who is actually running for president and who is still in it, Ron DeSantis this week had his level set. He fired a third of his staffers.
Right.
He got called to a donor meeting, I think in Utah, where he met with all the big donors and had a big powwow and talked about how much cash he had run through, how effective his campaign was, and listened to some donors and talked about how to level set and how to kind of readjust his campaign. He said that classic. The launch didn't go as well as it did. We need to recalibrate our message moving forward. And in response to this, he put out a message that was produced by a young man on his multimedia team who used some Nazi symbols
Nazi imagery,
in the video. This video made it online, I think, for a couple minutes before it was yanked down. Not a very good.
It wasn't even subtle. Like this was direct Nazi imagery.
And the gentleman that made this image or this video, he's 24 years old, and he has done some work for Nick Fuentes.
Yeah,
he is the white supremacist that Kanye hangs out with, and is just a general dumbass. How does the DeSantis campaign just continue to make basic mistake after basic mistake?
Yeah, that's what's, I think, incredible about this. So, and you can go back to the anti-LGBTQ video that was disgusting that his team...
That's a banger.
Yeah. So, and then in the last weeks, there's been, which I don't know if we talked about, the Florida education standards on African-American...
Did you see how he handled that?
Oh, yes, I did. It was so bad. You're
going
to double down?
Yeah.
I mean...
Go ahead and spit out the line that everyone's got people fired up about. The one in Florida where they basically say there's when they talk about slavery in Florida, there's a line that basically says slaves learn skills while being in slavery that they use to better
some
themselves.
Personal benefit.
Yes, later on.
Yeah.
So dumb, silly. Is it historically accurate? Sure. You can talk about slaves and what they did in that context. To me, that's a very narrow story of slavery. That's part of a much bigger issue and themes you should be hitting on. Certainly not one about skill building.
So, and first of all, and the other thing here, for the first 246 years of slavery in America, the vast majority of slaves had no way to build skills because they had no path to freedom.
They were property.
Right. It's not like and those that became free men and women were very few in between. So to just put that out there as this just statement without any context doesn't even make anything.
I have no problem with saying that there were some slaves that used their skills to try to make their life as good as they could while they were slaves.
Right. And that's obvious, but that doesn't even need to be said.
Doesn't mean they were treated any better or morally their situation was any better. Oh, and when we made them not slaves, remember we kind of made it illegal for them to use any of those to own property or hold certain jobs or better themselves.
Well, and don't forget that in most cases, the skills that slaves learned were, manual labor skills. Most slaves were forbidden from learning how to read, so they were illiterate. They weren't allowed to learn any skills that might be advantageous to them if they were free.
Because never handled money.
There was this paranoia, and to some degree rightfully so, that if they escaped, the slave owners wanted to be able to retrieve them, and they didn't want a slave who was successful escaping in terms of being on their own. So, yes, obviously there were slaves who were able to use skills to their advantage. But that's not something you would point out in the greater context because it doesn't offset not having any personal agency over your life. I mean, it would be akin to saying, yeah, there were Jews who were prisoners at Birkenau who learned how to do tasks that they didn't know how to do before and maybe learned a skill that way. But again, that's why would you even point that out in the greater context of what happened?
The people that I used to own, because it was legal for me to own people at that point in time, did certain skills for me for free as part of being my slave. When I saw them doing something on their own, I either allowed them to do it so they would have some sort of maybe earn some more comfort or something else or trade this for something else, or I just went and took it from them and sold it or used it for whatever I wanted to because they're my property. Isn't that the right way to explain that in the right context?
That would be, yeah. I mean, because the way that it's framed in these standards, the exact verbiage makes it sound like it's an aside added, but, oh, by the way, just so you know.
You have no agency as a slave. You are my property. Whatever skills you have, I possess. And then when we made you not a slave, we made it really sure for the next 150 years you couldn't really use those in a significant way to further your life.
Right.
If that's not the story of slaves and skills in Florida, I don't know what is.
And what's bizarre to me is, I mean, I went through a public school system and learned about slavery and all that. Like, it's just, but there was no statement in my textbooks that said anything like that. I mean, and it's incredible to me that we're at a point where like that's the direction we're going. Like it doesn't need to be there. It doesn't add any value. Well, again, what you said, like that's self-evident that they would pick up skills if they're in captivity.
Sure.
There's no need to actually fill a line in a textbook. And
would they use those skills to try to better their life in any possible way they could?
Of course they would.
Does that mean...
Just like anybody would who's under duress or, doesn't have control of their own life.
One of the
But why would he double down on it? He could have ignored it or said, like, oh, I had nothing to do with this, which he did at first. But then he actually doubles down and supports that statement with a statement about, about a blacksmith, like this hypothetical.
Yes.
And I'm like, really? Like, and that's the thing you're going to choose to use? I mean, how many slaves were learned skills to be blacksmiths?
What Ron doesn't realize is that he passed too many laws in Florida. That there's strength in passing a law, but there's also a lot of strength in just talking about the laws you want to pass.
Yeah.
And that this could have been one of those laws that it's better as a talking point than actually passing it. Because once you pass it, you have to hire people to write this law. And they went out and hired two black academics from Florida. I think one of them came out and said she was so happy her ancestors were slaves, so she wasn't worshiping a tree in Africa anymore. So right off the bat, you got some kookiness there.
Yeah.
Then this law is written. And once a law is written, people can read it.
Right.
They can start interpreting it. They can start asking you questions about it. Questions, Ron, that you have to be prepared for.
Which he
How
isn't.
did you not know this, Ron?
But this is the governor who in Florida does not take questions from mainstream media, does not make himself available. No. And he has been slow to do that on the national level as a presidential candidate. So I guess I'm not terribly surprised at this point, but it's just one misstep after the next is where we're at now. And it's affecting him at the polls. I don't know if you saw the most recent polling that came out. So,
I mean, he barely cracks 20 in some polls.
Yeah, so there is polling, let's see, out of Iowa that has Trump at 46%, DeSantis at 16%, and Scott at 11%, right at his heels. South Carolina, Trump at 48%, Haley at 14%, DeSantis at 13%. So he's dropped to third in South Carolina with Scott at 10%. I mean, he's within a couple points of basically the next 4 or 5 presidential candidates.
This is Ron DeSantis' first 4 primaries. Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada, South Carolina.
Yeah.
The only state he has a puncher's chance in is Iowa.
Right.
Because Iowa does all kinds of kooky things, pretty free thinking up there.
Yeah.
But the only thing that gives DeSantis a real shot is that Trump, for some reason, will not stop attacking their governor that everybody loves.
So, but Trump can afford to lose Iowa, too.
In the state that DeSantis must win, Trump leads by 30 points.
Yes.
And if Trump loses it, it doesn't matter because he's taken the next 3.
Right. That's the thing. And Trump lost Iowa in 2016.
Yes, he did. Ted Cruz won it,
right.
I believe.
Which, if people recall, they should have known how Trump would be because at that time he said that was rigged. and that it wasn't a fair election. But in Iowa, this has been the case. I don't know how far you'd have to go back, but Iowa has not picked the presidential winner on either side for a while now.
Well, if I'm DeSantis, right off, because after you get through those 4, then you hit Super Tuesday.
Yeah.
So
and
my goal is to
now
make
quite a
Super
bit.
Tuesday.
Yeah.
So to do that, I have to win at least one of those states. The only state I have a shot at is Iowa, and I'm currently 30 points down. So if I'm DeSantis again, like we talked last week, it's time to start throwing some Hail Marys.
I don't have to look. Aren't most on the Republican side, aren't these like all winner take all now?
I believe so.
They're not proportional like they used to be.
No, I think these 4, when you hit Super Tuesday, I think you get a couple states that maybe, but these are winner take all.
Yeah.
So Nikki Haley or Tim Scott, both of them aren't making it to South Carolina.
No.
There's no reason to. If DeSantis doesn't win Iowa, New Hampshire, or Nevada, he's not making it to South Carolina either.
Where's the path for him?
We're going to have this thing wrapped up real quick. And it's just basically because outside of Trump, nobody's been able to gain any traction. Nobody's had that moment. The guy who we thought had some juice has turned out to be just a horrible campaigner and politician.
Yeah.
He just cannot craft a message.
He can't for the life of him. I mean, I was skeptical of him to begin with, but I didn't think he'd flame out this bad so quickly.
I mean, this is worse than Scott Walker.
Yeah.
I mean, this is just mistake after mistake after mistake. But Trump, not to be outdone, he's made a couple different videos I like. One of them was, have you seen the one where he takes his voice when he was president, and I believe this was an attack on Syria or Iran or something, and he basically said, hey, if you attack us, we'll come at you in a way you've never seen before.
Oh, I haven't seen this.
And he puts it behind a very ominous kind of background. It's basically Trump threatening people, throw me in jail and see what happens.
Okay. I think I did hear the text or the audio of this ad because, again, it was another example of him inciting people.
So if that one wasn't clear enough, then we get to the one that I sent
The one that you sent me
which
today.
is just straight QAnon lunacy at this point.
Right.
This is the deep state's after me. If I was the deep state, I would keep Trump out too. And this is a straight up QAnon conspiracy theory. This is all to keep Trump from destroying the deep
President
state.
Biden was installed.
Yes.
The election was rigged.
Hits on every
They're
trope
arresting
you want.
people that say otherwise now. It's this whole 1984 totalitarian state vibe
There's
to
a
it.
lot of wolves in the imagery.
Yeah.
There's a lot of kind of pseudo
It has
violence
an AI
in this.
voice as well. It's
It's-
very menacing, the tone. It
Looks like 2 sophomores in high school did it, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, it does. Yeah.
But it's not subtle.
No, it isn't subtle at all. Yeah.
And then DeSantis, to not be outdone, he decides today in an interview to say that if he gets elected, he's going to appoint RFK Jr. as the head of the FDA or the CDC. So he basically just destroyed himself for a general election.
Yeah. You can't even... I don't know. You can't make these things up anymore.
I give him some credit for recognizing where he's at. And that if he doesn't beat the 800-pound large lunatic in these first 3 states, this is a wasted exercise.
But he keeps throwing these ridiculous Hail Mary passes, and they don't land anywhere. I mean, he doesn't land a punch, and so how long do you keep doing the same thing over and over again before you say, hey, we need to change course? I mean, he hasn't figured that out yet.
So, Brandon, I always assumed that political campaigns were run by extremely intelligent, very professional people, and these were very serious kind of endeavors. And there's no possible way you would ever do something as crazy as run for president and take all this money from people unless you had, a very data-driven, very exacting plan. You had a way to get there. We're quickly learning that's completely naive, and most of these things are done on a lark, it seems like.
They are. Well, and I would also argue a contributing factor is that a lot of the very savvy political consultants and ad people have left and are not on the scene anymore. So you're left with, second-rate, third-rate people who really don't know what they're doing, who are just shrills and lackeys. So that's part of the problem.
You tell me if this is even plausible. I really think Ron DeSantis thought this is going to be a 2-slogan campaign. Woke is where Florida goes to die, and Make America Florida. And just like Make America Great Again, all I'm going to have to do is say those phrases, get the crowd fired up, wrap a little rhetoric around that, And just like Trump, that's what's going to take me, that's what's going to build momentum. That's what's going to take me across the finish line. And when that simple approach didn't work, his whole team seems to be completely confounded now to what will work. And if that simple messaging doesn't get me where I want to go, they seem completely incapable of crafting a different one.
Yeah, I think that's exactly where he is. And he's running out of time. And
do people launch campaigns with just that lack of thought?
I mean, they're not supposed to. I mean, typically they haven't in the past. I mean, but look at how he launched his campaign. It was on Twitter with Elon Musk.
God, that was such a disaster.
And with VC guy. What's his name?
Oh, I can't. It was so bad. I didn't even know the VC.
Right.
VC
I mean, obviously it cut out there all the technical issues. But yeah, I mean, it was far from like traditional way that politicians have launched campaigns. There was no takeaways that people had saying this is the 5-point plan or this is his overall messaging. This is why he's a better candidate. And we always go back to he's been reluctant to draw a contrast between him and Trump. He doesn't ever want to bring Trump up. And so the inability to do that, does it give him room to really differentiate himself other than trying to just like drop these bombs like the RFK nomination to where he can say, I'm further right than Trump. I'm Trumpier than Trump.
Who is that? At least that is for the proper audience.
Well, it is, but it doesn't. It fails to recognize that audience isn't going to be swayed by that.
Sure, but at least he's connecting. This is the audience I'm going to, which is the right of Trump, and this is the message that they need to hear.
Yeah.
The next step for him is to start attacking Trump over the vaccine.
Yeah.
That's fertile ground for
Well, and he's done
DeSantis.
that here and there, but I think those attacks will begin in earnest soon. Yeah.
The thing that I think most pundits on TV are starting to just come right out and say, without Trump, we have no idea how the Republican electorate is going to react. In a presidential election that Donald Trump is not on the ballot, we have no idea what that outcome looks like. We don't know who shows up. We don't know what the turnout is. We have no idea if the MAGA base is portable to anybody else. But I think we'd both agree that we know right now it's not going to DeSantis.
No, he's not getting it.
He may peel off a little bit, but he has failed in setting himself up as the heir apparent to MAGA and to Trump.
Yeah, I mean, it's been remarkable to watch his destruction, essentially.
Did you see Mitch McConnell today?
I did. I went back and watched the video because people informed me before I had a chance to see it. And McConnell's 82 years old.
Yeah.
He's a year older than Joe Biden.
Well.
And again, we go back to the age factor and how like these leaders that are just ancient,
Brandon,
don't know when to call it quits.
Last year and a half, with my dad having a stroke, I've spent a lot of time with people in their 80s, and I can tell you none of them should be in charge of anything.
Yeah,
anything. It literally looked like he had a little bit of a mini stroke.
It did look
while
like
he was
that,
sitting right there.
I mean, he had to be, shepherded away by his staff, and so it's
what I really, really feel sorry for is nobody in his family is telling him, you're done.
Yeah.
It's time to go. That will never happen. Mitch McConnell will die in office because Kentucky has a Democratic governor. And there is no way they're allowing him to appoint a Democrat to that seat.
Right.
So this is where, again, I feel sorry for Mitch. But Mitch, until I hate to say it, unless you die in the office, nobody is going to come to you and say, Mitch, is it time? You're
right.
82. Mitch, you've written your legacy. You've done your part. Your story's complete. It's time for you
what is left?
Go.
I mean, again,
what's
they
left?
just call it quits. I mean, same thing with Dianne Feinstein, right? I mean, who's still there. I mean, and, she is not there mentally and hasn't shown up for how many votes. And
well, as a guy in your 30s, this has to drive you crazy.
Yeah.
To say, why can't this old dude just get out of the way? Just go home. Let somebody in their 40s, let somebody else give it a shot. We don't need Mitch McConnell.
No. And it used to be, it was more common for these types of, politicians who, were of age and had reached a certain age. They would retire. They'd bow out. And now they don't. They just hang on. And I don't know if it's status, it's power, it's not
the
wanting to give
CEO
it
syndrome.
Up. Yeah.
It's this is what I attribute to. Brandon, when's the last time somebody told Mitch McConnell, well, that's wrong. We're not doing that.
Right.
Your idea is stupid. I don't know whose idea we're going with, but whatever Mitch said, just take that off the
People
board.
don't do that.
No. how many everybody does. Everybody around Mitch is designed to give Mitch exactly what he needs, as in all politicians are. Be a little meaner to people. People would move out of those spots at a much faster clip.
So I saw similar statements made about Senator Chuck Grassley, who's actually 89.
Yeah.
And so his staff are like, oh, he's just as bright and quick as he was 40 years ago. No, he's not.
No, he's not.
That's clearly not the case. And there's plenty of signs that point otherwise. But again, like you said, it's that staff. They probably just tell him what he wants to hear. They just, they lavish praise upon him and stoke his ego.
When's the last time somebody looked at Chuck Grassley and said, Chuck, you're just too damn old. You're 89. Yeah. What the hell are you doing?
And he just got reelected. He's served another 6 years.
Chuck, do you know why you're here for? I hate to say it, Chuck, but you're here to release that 1023 form.
Right.
That's what you're really here
That's what he was done. Yeah.
There's just, when we need somebody who really shame doesn't apply anymore and they're not running for anything else, that's the role Grassley plays. Yeah. And it's kind of gross to see it.
It really is, because, I mean, once they get of that age, they just become tools, really.
They just do it to themselves, though.
For the party. Yeah,
they can't recognize that, I guess.
Yeah. And like you said, their family and people around them are unwilling to step in. So,
Brandon, this is where I think you and I have an advantage over a lot of these folks, is that I know I have a family that if I make a slight mistake or very often any direction, I have people who quickly will yank my chain back to where I need to be. That is obviously something that
give
these
you a
men
reality
don't
check.
have.
They don't have anybody.
They just don't
give
have
them a reality check.
Did Hunter Biden get a reality check today with the judge?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up. I wanted to talk about that. So there was some chaos in the courtroom where the judge was trying to confirm the details of this plea deal. The fact that Hunter Biden would pay these back taxes and this fine, which would supposedly grant him immunity from any future prosecution. Yeah. But the prosecution, the government wasn't on the same page with his defense attorneys, so they had to go back into a huddle and basically have a conversation about this. And I can't even remember where it left off. Are they drawing up new terms?
They're supposed to be back tomorrow with new terms. But this makes the DOJ look a little bit like amateur.
Yeah, how
right?
Were they not prepared for this? I don't understand.
How do you not know, hey, Brandon, these charges, if we find anything else on you, these don't apply? That seems pretty straightforward.
You would, I mean, think about all the time that was spent to get to this point.
Well,
how was this
we're
not
5 years into this?
Yeah, I mean, how would you not have this ironed out? I don't get how it gets this far.
And there was a problem too with the divergent or the program, the divergence program on the gun. The judge is like, that doesn't apply.
Diversion program, right?
Yeah, that doesn't apply anymore. How does this apply to a guy who threw a gun that has his girlfriend throw a gun in the trash can? So I think she also questioned that too. And I think that's where most of the problems are at around the actual gun charge and how they maneuvered that not to be a felony.
Yeah.
I hate to say this. I said this 2 weeks ago. If you want to bring most of this to a conclusion, at least this stage of this, hang a felony gun charge on Hunter.
Right.
There's no reason not to do it.
That would be the easy way out and to quell at least some of the Republican.
If the Republicans
uproar.
had a talking point that we pushed the DOJ into a felony conviction of Hunter Biden on gun charges, that's a massive winning talking point for them.
Can I just make a point more broadly than Hunter Biden, but into this whole argument about the Biden business dealings and if there is any there were any there, that which is a completely separate topic. Why does nobody say in the discussion of all this, all of this was, if this happened, was years ago. So this is when Biden was vice president. So please tell me how you can get to the point where you're Kevin McCarthy and you're raising the specter of an impeachment inquiry on this when this isn't even something that has happened when Biden was president. I thought impeachment was supposed to be about your performance in office as president, not something that happened 8 years before you were president.
Well, please impeach him. Please. But
how can you impeach somebody for things in years before they started the job?
I want them to impeach him because then the Democrats get to run the trial. And the Democrats are going to do things like call witnesses. Some of the witnesses they're going to call are going to be really, really interesting. Who's the guy, Les Parvin?
Oh, yeah.
He's going to be called.
He's
going to talk about Ukraine and Burisma and Trump
the
and
Israeli guy, the spy. Yeah,
this is an exercise in creating political damage on Biden. That's what this is, and it's very effective because Hunter is a scumbag.
Right.
And Hunter has done what most political families do. He's the bag man. We all know this. There's no difference in Trump,
influence
Clinton.
peddling. Yeah, it was done by the Clintons. It was done by
It's what
Trump.
politicians do.
Right. So are we going to hold all of them responsible? Are we going to hold the members of Congress
Is this the
responsible?
new
who do
standard?
this? Yeah.
Everybody's family gets investigated?
Can we have multiple impeachments? Let's start the list. I mean,
Joe makes a valid point, too. Show me where that $34 million went. Kind of hard to hide that kind of money, isn't it?
Yeah.
If I brought in that kind of cash, where's it at? I'm all for it. If there's malfeasance here, throw the book at everybody. I don't give a shit.
They're also relying on supposed witness testimony that is not unlike the testimony that Christopher Steele provided with the Clinton dossier.
A lot of hearsay.
That Republicans then poked all these holes
Sure.
in and said was hearsay. So
That's what I'm saying. Hey, pubs, if you're really feeling yourself, impeach. Let's start putting this all on the record, boys. Let's stop fucking around with Comer and all this.
Right.
Let's get to the Senate and let's have a real trial.
I want to hear what the charges are going to be, because if you're going to argue that Hunter Biden is a scumbag, you'll get no argument from me. We know that. But again, trying to form an argument that somehow Joe Biden, now as president, is affected by this, that's where this all falls apart.
You have this laptop since 2019.
Yeah.
The Trump DOJ under Bill Barr confirmed the authenticity of the laptop.
Right.
Whatever's on the laptop, you've already used. It's like, come on, McCarthy. If it's time to big dick, let's go.
But is this play by McCarthy? Is this just to buy time with the?
It has to be.
Yeah, the hard right in his caucus and Trump, who's breathing down his neck in terms of doing something.
I mean, when they threw the first Trump impeachment to the Senate, to the Republicans, they knew it died right there.
Yeah.
This impeachment, as far as vote goes to remove Biden, they have nowhere close to the 70 votes.
Well, you mean in the Senate, right?
In the Senate.
But I don't think they even have the votes in the House, because I don't think they're going to get every Republican,
No.
particularly Republicans from swing districts, are going to vote for this.
Was there 20 or 25, or maybe even more? I thought I saw it was that number, Republicans, congressmen who are in a district that Joe Biden won.
That's about right, yeah.
Those people are going to have a really, really hard time voting for impeachment for Biden.
And they don't have, again, with their thin majority, they only have a, 3-4 majority.
Four-seater.
There's not room there, yeah.
Again, if you can't reach where you want to legally, do it politically. Roll the dice. Let's impeach. Let's start impeaching every single president every single time. Let Congress knock themselves out. Because when you get to the Senate, it's a totally different story.
It is.
I cannot believe if they are that stupid to do that. I can't.
Well, they were
believe
stupid
go through
enough
with it.
to want to, I don't know, what is the terminology for it? Expunge Trump's impeachment?
Which is
which you
totally
can't even
made
do.
that-
You can't do that. How would you do that?
One legal expert explained, each Congress, when it ends, it's over.
Yeah.
They don't. It's not a
can't
linear
expunge it.
movement. You can't expunge
Well,
that.
and-
That doesn't happen.
It's not a legal process. This isn't like a legal expungement for, a felony or misdemeanor.
And
It
did
doesn't
you
make
hear
sense.
Trump demanded that out of McCarthy because
Right.
McCarthy said, well, let's just wait and see what happens with these charges.
That's what's so stupid about this. And the timeline doesn't allow for them. How are they going to have an impeachment trial with what, they're about to go on a 6-week vacation. And then they still have to pass budget. And then, next year you're going to be in election mode there's no timeline to even have this trial.
Do you think Taylor Greene, the Freedom Caucus, Boebert, do you think they can push him into calling for an impeachment vote? I think they can.
I think they can.
I think he has
if
to.
he's gone this far. I mean, I was really shocked that he would go far enough to even just throw it out there like this. But if he's willing to do that, that's the problem with McCarthy. I think he is so focused on just keeping his job, he's willing to do anything, and he'll pander to anybody in his caucus.
Hey, if you want to put MTG out on the floor and try to whip some votes to get people to vote for Trump's imaginary expungement, so be it. I don't care about that. But the impeachment, this is a little bit of a different process. I think McCarthy will resist the urge, but there's going to be a lot of pressure on him to do so. McCarthy also knows, too, next week he gets the gift of Trump's J6 indictment, and at least for 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 days, this all goes away. Because we're going to be really focused down on Trump and
it buys him some breathing room.
What's happened with him. I knew 2023 was going to be a brutal year for Joe Biden once the Republicans won the House.
Yeah.
And the only thing that's kept it from being as brutal as it could be is the Republicans' own incompetency at what they're trying to do.
Right.
If they actually had their shit together, this would be a much rougher ride.
I mean, they don't have any discipline, and they're fragmented as hell.
But Biden is definitely in the barrel right now.
Yeah.
And sooner or later, he is going to have to come out and sit with somebody and talk about this, which I think that's really what the whole that's the target. That's really what they want to force him to do, is to force him into an interview where on his feet he has to answer questions about how many meetings have you sat in with your son? What countries have you visited with your son? Because I don't know if Biden can handle that.
Well, and that's probably the easy part compared to having to address this in debates if you look further down the line.
Biden's not debating. There's no way.
You don't think he's going to be on the debate stage?
Especially if it's Trump. Trump gives him the perfect. I'm not debating that.
That's true. Yeah, he can say. Yeah.
If it's Trump, I think there's a total reason why he steps back. If it's not Trump, I still think he does.
Wasn't one of the debates canceled in 2020?
Yeah,
there was only 2.
Yeah,
was that due to? I don't even remember.
It was COVID, I think.
Oh, okay. Was it because Trump had COVID or no? Or somebody had COVID?
I'm trying to figure. I've forgotten Trump's lunatic COVID timeline, but there were supposed to be 3 debates. Only 2 happened, and in the first debate was when Trump was just a complete loon.
I remember that.
Where he just screamed, shouted, talked over everything. It's just like, well, he's just a lunatic.
I couldn't remember the reason why the other debate was canceled. If it was something,
I thought it was COVID.
You're probably right.
But you can't put Biden through 3 90-minute debates.
No, I don't see how he manages that at all.
I'm still under the impression that Biden's not going to be there at the end. That
there's going to be
no.
Okay.
Have you seen him cut a single commercial? Have you seen him go anywhere to campaign?
Well, and that's what worries me. I mean, he doesn't have the wherewithal. I mean, how is he going to be doing these multi-state, drop-ins?
That's what the rich people in Utah asked DeSantis this week. Hey, dum-dum, you've spent 40% of your budget already.
Oh, my God. Have you seen how he's blown his budget on private jets and everything?
What commercials have you run?
None.
What mass marketing have you done? I mean,
he is blowing through all the stoner money.
He said he was going to fire 12 people before he went to Utah. He came out of that conference saying, I'm firing 1/3 of my staff. So I think he got the law laid down.
He has the message.
The money spigots dried up. And I think somebody today asked me, could DeSantis recover and run again in 4 years? No.
I don't think so.
Once you take that donor group and you burn through that cash, there's no second trip to say, "Hey, I'm better now. Let's try this again."
He won't be in office at that point. His accomplishments will be years behind him, if you call them that, and he'll be a has-been. There's going to be so many other people vying for the nomination at that point. It'll be a whole different landscape.
We are under 25 days to the first debate, I think.
That's crazy.
That is insane. It's 100 degrees outside, and we're talking about a presidential debate.
Yeah.
So Trump certainly isn't going to that one. And I understand his logic. If I'm 30 points up on all the states I need, why do I need to go to a debate? It's quickly becoming, I guess what I'm feeling is the window of opportunity to make a move is closing. And the only move left for these people is who's going to try to get the VP to be there if Trump falls.
It'll be interesting during the debate how many of them
talking about.
Position themselves as the VP apparent
that's true.
And make a play for that rather than for president. And I think this also, Trump's willingness to just, be dismissive of the debates also sends a strong message how the RNC doesn't matter. Like, again, this is the Trump show, and, Trump can get away with doing what he wants on his own time, and the RNC just has to accommodate that.
I'm hearing a lot of folks out in right Mediaville complaining that the money's drying up, that the RNC doesn't have the money that it's had in the past.
That's true. Yeah.
Local state operations are saying we don't have the cash.
That reminds me, did you read the National Review article about the downfall of the 4 state parties? Arizona, Michigan.
I've read something like that, but yeah, Arizona's one. They've already come out and said, you're not getting any RNC money because we don't think you have your shit together enough to do anything.
Right. So you have these 4 swing state Republican parties, essentially, that are hemorrhaging money, staff, and the common denominator with all 4 of them is that they have elevated party officials who are into election denialism, QAnon conspiracy. People are leaving the party in droves. The money men and the people that were smart and reasoned have been pushed out and excluded.
Yep.
It was a really fantastic National Review piece if people want to Google it. But,
and I've heard, too, that like the infrastructure in those states is not being
It's
built.
not there, yeah.
The whole, we got to get boots on the ground. We have to collect ballots. We have to do some ballot harvesting. We have to get people to the polls. I was listening to Charlie Kirk the other day who was bitching that the RNC, they have no boots on the ground yet in Arizona or in Wisconsin. That's not good.
That is
first debates
amazing
in
to me.
3 weeks. If you're not building the type of infrastructure that collects ballots now, you're not going to have it in 2024. So I think that the Republicans might just start to be entering in the phase where they realize you can only squeeze the turnip so many times. There's only so much money you can get out of the base. And over the last 5 years, Trump has exacted a huge toll out of these people, and it's just not going to turn around overnight.
No.
Let them
Arizona,
start running out of
Colorado,
money.
Michigan, and Minnesota were the 4 state parties, by the way.
Well, Colorado, you guys have abandoned Colorado, haven't you? You're not getting back in there.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's not happening. But it's striking that, like, they've given up completely. Like, they're not even trying. So they're completely forfeiting some of these states. And, Minnesota was also one of those states that was, even though it's always been a blue state, it's been close in presidential elections at times. But again, the party has just fallen apart there. But what I don't understand is states like Michigan and Arizona, which are states that Trump won not very long ago and have a strong Republican contingent, a strong MAGA contingent, and how those states are in free fall. It's interesting.
And I think once DeSantis, I don't think DeSantis gets the nomination. And he goes back to Florida for 2 years and is gone. I think in 4 years after DeSantis is gone, Florida's right back in play. I mean, Florida has a housing crisis right now. They have a housing insurance crisis. They have an inflation crisis.
Their inflation is higher than the national
They have
average.
a migrant worker issue down there. They have a massive teacher shortage.
Which, by the way, there's a lot of cost issues because at one point I think, and maybe for some people it still is, Florida is attractive because they have no state income tax, obviously, in the weather. But all of these other issues you mentioned are starting to offset that lack of state income tax.
If you can't buy homeowners insurance, or insuring your home is more than your monthly mortgage payment, that's going to be a problem. Also, too, I've heard they have 6,000 or 7,000 teachers they're short next year. They're really going to have a teacher problem here in the next 18 months as well.
Oh,
so
DeSantis
DeSantis might be a flash in the pan that dissipates very, very quickly.
Yeah, I think you're right about that.
Well, Brandon, it's a crisp, 105 degrees outside. We've joined the rest of the country, it seems like, and just having heat over, over 3 digits. Is there anything possibly you could do outside in the sun, or is this weekend just totally inside?
I think it's mostly inside. I may go swimming because that's the one activity.
Do you enjoy swimming when it's this hot?
I like just cooling off.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't stay in the water long, but I like to submerge myself, cool off a bit, and then go back inside. But
we had a big pool growing up, and the water sometimes gets over 90 degrees. It's just like jumping in a big, giant bathtub at that point.
Oh, yeah. So I have access to a pretty nice apartment complex pool with friends, and so I sometimes
do you just go over there sometimes when you're not supposed to?
Yeah. So it's kind of a nice perk, but yeah, I mean, at this level, you want the water to be cold. This is not when you want the water to be like bath water.
I was so glad. They were supposed to build a pool in our subdivision and didn't, and I was like the only one who was like, yes.
You were opposed to it?
Don't have to worry about the kids. Don't have a bunch of aggravation about that. I'm like, guys, this is a win. You don't think it is now, but trust me, this is a win. Yeah, I think this is one of the weekends you just got to stay inside because it's going to be obnoxious.
I mean, I think for it's like the next 10 days, it's supposed to be
whatever
brutal.
Bubble was wherever. Well, I think they said it was the jet stream's fault. The jet stream is like dipped down so high or something, is allowing all this hot air that it's
is
all
Arizona
out
of their cycle? They had like 23 days above 110 degrees.
That's no human being should live in Phoenix. That's just disgusting.
I mean that was brutal, and I say that as somebody who likes the desert.
Yeah,
but yeah,
even you'd have to call it on that.
Yeah.
I'm going to Vegas August 9th. My
okay.
son and his friends have planned their
Oh,
first
yeah, you
Vegas
said that.
trip.
That's going to be fun.
Yeah, so he called me. I'm going to run out there for a day with them just to kind of get them settled into Vegas. So, and I think the high that day is 119 degrees.
Ooh. So you're not staying the whole weekend?
No,
Oh,
no,
okay.
I have no desire. These are all 21-year-olds.
Yeah.
It's like, listen, I'll get you to where you're supposed to be. I'll give
I
you the
get that.
slight lay of the land, and then and I'm buying dinner that night, and then I don't want to see any of you. I don't want to, not on the same hotel, same floor, nothing. You guys do what you want to do. I'll do what I want to do. Then I'm going home.
Vegas is like especially at that age, turning 21 is like the ultimate like guys trip. Yeah.
It's like, guys, you can't do everything in a day, so you just
Yeah.
have to pick it out. Are we drinking today? Are we gambling today? You buy the pool today. Just pick a theme
Pick
and try
one
to
thing
stick
to do,
with
yeah.
that with that day.
They're just there for the weekend, right?
They're there Wednesday through Saturday.
Oh, wow. That's actually
Yeah.
longer than I would have thought. I
Yeah.
was going to say, like, my limit for Vegas is usually like a weekend.
Yeah.
Like a Friday through Sunday or
I'm
Thursday
a 3-day
night through
guy,
Sunday.
and
Yeah.
that's it. By the
I
time
feel
you
like
hit that fourth day,
Vegas gets exhausting once anything past that.
Yeah, and it's so fucking hot out there too now.
Yeah.
So, all right, that's our hour. Thanks, Brandon.
Thanks, Craig.
Thanks for listening to 2 Men in the Middle. Make sure to give us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts. Check out our website at 2meninthemiddle.com. Drop us an email at 2meninthemiddle@gmail.com or tweet at us at 2 Men in the Middle. We'll see you next week.